Hi, welcome to the second tutorial on mutations. Here we're going to add the functionality for updating and deleting existing Pokemons. So let's start as usual by getting into the right directory. And get the dependencies. Okay, now that we've done that, let's open it up in our code editor. So since the last exercise, a few changes have been made to Pokemon card. In this case, there's a name and a URL as part of the state object. The state gets updated every time the text box changes, with the new state holding the contents of the text box. Also, further down, we now have this delete and update button. There are callbacks attached, but they don't really do anything at the moment. And what we're going to do is define the mutations we need in order to handle these new actions. Before we do that, let's go up to the fragment we've defined earlier that gets the data that this component needs, currently just the name and the URL of this Pokemon, and let's get the ID as well, because we're going to need this ID when we do mutations. Okay, great. Now let's go and get mutations. I'm just going to copy them for now as well. So we can either take this update Pokemon mutation as is, as we've written the previous mutation, or we can actually use the fragment we've defined inside the mutation when we specify the parameters we wanted to return. So I'm going to do that now for the reasons we discussed earlier. It just means that our code is a little bit more robust if anything changes in terms of data requirements later on. So I'll go ahead and paste this at the bottom. And I'll also grab this delete Pokemon mutation. So here again, we're defining the mutation, we're expecting some parameters, and we're using those parameters in the actual mutation itself. Here we ask for the ID, as well as the parameters we've defined in the Pokemon card, Pokemon fragment. Down here, all we do is ask for the ID. Let's go ahead and wrap this up in a component like we did last time. Note that we're wrapping delete Pokemon and update Pokemon into this Pokemon card component. So before we were only ever packaging up either a single query or a single mutation, here we can actually combine them. Now that we're using this GraphQL function on the bottom, let's go ahead and make sure that we've imported that in. Finally, if we have a look at the buttons down here, okay, now that we've defined our mutations and we've imported all the necessary things we need, let's go and fill out those blank callbacks. So further down, we define handle update and handle delete, but there's nothing inside and they're not doing anything right now. So let's go ahead and fill those out. What we've done here is we've taken the update Pokemon function that's been passed in as a result of the query that we wrapped this whole component with, and we pass in as variables the props Pokemon ID, name, and URL. The ID we already have, but the name and the URL are taken from the state like we've seen earlier. Whenever the text box changes, the state is changed to reflect the value in the text box. Right now, that value is what we're using, so the name and the URL. Once this function is called, we can put this .then, we can chain it with this .then function, and in that we can pass this callback, this.props.afterChange. So this component is expecting this afterChange callback. Handle delete does a similar thing. We look at this delete Pokemon function that takes in some variables, and we have this delete Pokemon function, which is again defined by the mutation that we used when we wrap this up, and it's expecting this parameter, the Pokemon ID, the ID of the Pokemon that's going to be deleted, after which we chain it with a then function and execute some callback that's passed in as props. So before we go too far ahead, let's go ahead and make sure we're passing in this afterChange function as the prop. So we use Pokemon card in Pokemon page. And if we look, we'll see that right now we haven't defined this yet. So let's define that now. And we're just going to use the same callback we used to handle the cancel action. In this case, we're just going to use this go back, which just replaces the router with a slash. So go back to the home page. Now that we've done that, we should be ready to run it, so let's give that a go. We'll go to localhost 3000, and we have one Pokemon, because I removed a few a while ago. We'll click it, and we'll click delete. And we get redirected back to the home page with the Pokemon still there, but if we refresh the page, we have no more Pokemon. Now what is annoying is we had to refresh the page to see the result of our mutation. Well, we fixed that last time by adding in this data ID from object field, which essentially allowed Apollo to identify objects from a unique ID. But in the case of deleting, it's not so simple. What we did last time was when we add a new Pokemon, in the response, we specify we want all of the owned Pokemon from that trainer. When the response comes back and it's clear that there's a new unique Pokemon, Apollo updates the store, and we see the change reflected instantly. But in the case of deleting a Pokemon, even if we specify in the response to send back the existing Pokemon, Apollo doesn't realize that the response isn't a subset of the Pokemon, but it's actually all of the Pokemon that the trainer owns. So it doesn't get rid of the existing Pokemon in its store, the one that we deleted. The quick fix to this is to just tell Apollo to force fetch, which essentially says, okay, just go ahead and get all the data again. And when we do that, the cache is replaced with the response, and because the Pokemon that we deleted isn't in the response, it works. So let's do that now. Let's go into Pokedex. And copy the force fetch field and paste in the force fetch field. Now that the Pokemon are always force fetched here, we can go back to the add Pokemon card and remove the trainer section and just replace that with the ID. Now if we try this and we go back to the app, hot reloading is enabled, so we shouldn't have to refresh. And I'm just going to make a few fake Pokemons. If we click on this and we click delete, we can see that instantly our change is reflected. And we no longer have to refresh the page to see the outcome. Okay, brilliant. So what we've done here is we've implemented update and delete, and we've had a quick glimpse of how to handle these caching issues where maybe something's changed in the client and we need to make sure that everything syncs up properly. To learn more about optimizing this process, or finding out other ways of doing this, check out the excursion on mutation results in Optimistic UI. See you in the next chapter where we talk about pagination.